Welcome everyone to tonight's event with Andrew Gilpin from Caring for God's Acre, and we'll be looking at the biodiversity of burial grounds. I'm Ben from the Biodiversity Information Service, and tonight's event is one of a series that we've been running throughout this lockdown period on wildlife awareness and promoting the recording of wildlife, mainly across the Brecon Beacons National Park and Powys, which is the area that we cover, but also across Wales and of course the rest of the UK. And we've been able to put this series of events on thanks to funding that we've received from the Brecon Beacons National Park and Cliff Bar. So thanks to both of those for providing the funding for us for this and our series of events, which are all available on YouTube. So when you get the link, you'll be able to see the rest of the events that we put on. So this is the Biodiversity Information Service, and this is the area that we cover in the red outline in Mid Wales. And we're one of 4 local environmental record centres, or LERCs, that cover the whole of Wales, and we all collate the wildlife records for our region, our area, and then we make all those available on a website database, and that's available for people who need to use those wildlife records to make decisions, such as for management plans for wildlife trust sites, for example, and also for research, and also for planning decisions as well. We also support a network of wildlife recorders across our area and collaboratively across the whole of Wales, and we also encourage new people, maybe such as yourselves, to get involved in recording the wildlife that you see. So this is the area that this covers, mainly most parts of Mid Wales. We don't have any coastline. We're the only local environmental record centre in Wales that doesn't have a coastline, so we do like quite a few marine species in our records database. And we're all about putting wildlife on the map, so getting people such as yourselves to make biological records of the wildlife that you see, and then we can turn them into what we call dots on the maps that you can see here on the right, and that's for tree bumblebee records in this area, Powys and Brecon Beacons National Park. You can see the fairly distinctive tree bumblebee there with the orangey thorax, the black body and the white tail. So that's a tree bumblebee. And on the right, you can see maybe 100 or so different records that we have of that species. And these records can also tell a story. So if we go back a few years, and will let me look at the records that we had for tree bumblebee about 10 years ago, you'll see that hopefully you'll see in a moment. Just pause the share and then resume. Look, and here we go. And if you look at the dots on the map, the black ones there, kind of in the middle of the area, you'll see about 10 years ago we only had a handful of records for the tree bumblebee, and that tells the story of this species heading north and west, mainly due to climate change, but also due to the nest boxes that people have been putting up in the past decade or so for birds, because they actually are a tree nesting species, hence the name tree bumblebee. So those records that we received are all really useful in telling this story of how this tree bumblebee, the species, has been moving north and west due to climate change since first being recorded in southwest England about the year 2001 or something like that. So the really useful information is gathered from wildlife records that people like yourself do make. And I know Andrew is going to talk about making wildlife records in churchyards, but there's a couple of apps and also online sites that you can use for making wildlife records. And one is the Look Wales app, and that's for wildlife records in Wales, and nationally, including Wales, in the UK, iRecord, and they're both apps that you can download onto your smartphone. And iRecord is also an online recording website, so you can actually make your records online if you prefer not to use a smartphone. And at the bottom there, the what, where, when and who, are the 4 pieces of information that we need in order to get a proper wildlife record. So we need to know what you've seen, where and when you saw it, so location and date, and then who saw it, so who you are as the recorder. And that's just in case we've got any questions or queries to ask you about it. So it's really easy to use, and if you have got a smartphone, have a go at downloading that and have a go at making some records. And you can find more about the Biodiversity Information Service on our website. There's lots of useful tools on there, and there's also a link to YouTube for watching this in a few days' time and our other event videos. And we're also on social media, so if you are into Twitter, Facebook or Instagram, then you can find our posts on there and find out what you've been up to and see some of the species that have been spotted and recorded in our area. And all those wildlife records in Wales end up on this wildlife database, this online database that we call Aderyn. And there's a couple of tools that anyone can use, and one of the most useful ones is the What's in My Area tool, and that allows you to look at every area of Wales and see a list of wildlife species that has been recorded in your area. So you might be interested to look at the area you live, and then you'll see a list of all the different species that are being recorded in that 1 kilometre square in the area that you live. And that's just for Wales, because we only cover Wales along with our 3 colleagues in the north, west and south. So have a look at that web address. I'll post that in the chat as well later. So that's all from me. Thanks to Andrea for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm sure you will, and we'll see you afterwards for any question and answer and discussion.
Welcome to this talk, which is all about burial grounds and how they're hotspots for biodiversity across Wales. I'm Andrea and I work for Caring for God's Acre, the charity dedicated to the conservation of all burial grounds. We work towards these sites being beautiful, welcoming and connected to their communities. We are a national charity covering Wales and England, and 2020 was our 20th anniversary. We focus on the conservation of the natural, built and social heritage and support burial grounds of all types and sizes, ranging from small church or chapel yards to green burial sites and urban cemeteries. There are over 20,000 burial grounds in Wales and England, spanning different cultures, religions and centuries. The size of each ranges from under 1/4 acre for a small parish church or chapel to over 200 acres for a large cemetery. Added together, the area is similar to that of Exmoor National Park or the Isle of Wight. The key point is that these sites are distributed in a way that means that they are accessible to a significant number of the population, and each is nestled within its own distinct community. In the mid-19th century, cemeteries were created on the edges of towns and cities in response to increasing urban populations. These cemeteries were often designed by eminent landscape designers as gardens of remembrance with a public park in mind, hence the garden character of many. The 3rd largest cemetery in the UK is Cathay Cemetery in Cardiff. It's 110 acres and has been designated a site of importance for nature conservation. Burial grounds often contain old trees, ancient stonework and walls, flowery grassland, nooks and crannies for birds, mammals and invertebrates. It's the mosaic of features that makes them so unique and valuable. The community of plants, fungi and animals have taken many years to establish. Their heritage value and even their continuing presence cannot be taken for granted. If managed properly, these sites can continue to be hotspots for biodiversity and form an important part of the green corridor networks for wildlife. However, they're under threat from development, closure, undermanagement and mismanagement. First of all, let's look into the grassland. Sites which manage this sensitively benefit both plant and animal species. A burial ground is probably the most ancient enclosed piece of land in a parish, town or city. The grassland in it will have been relatively undisturbed, reseeding naturally for hundreds if not thousands of years. It will also have been both scythed for hay and grazed by animals during its time as a burial ground. In days gone by, the hay was part of the vicar's stipend, part of his pay. A benefit of this management over a very long time is the rich diversity of grasses, flowers and animals. This habitat was once widespread in the UK but is now rare. Since the 1940s, over 97% has vanished. Most burial grounds predate the 1940s, so are now some of the few places that it remains, because they have not been artificially fertilised, treated with herbicides or ploughed. Providing the site hasn't been neglected and the grass cuttings have been raked up and removed regularly, this important habitat persists regardless of whether the grass is kept short mown or long like a meadow. In order to have a flower-rich site like this, often all groups have to do is tweak their cutting regime and simply let it grow. Many species are here just waiting to flower, and no reseeding is usually necessary. So how can we manage the grass in a way that encourages the wildflowers whilst still being sensitive to visitors' needs? First of all, a mixture of grass heights is best for wildlife, as each type benefits different plants and animals. These heights also suit the various usages of the site. The various heights to consider are short, medium and long. Here we have short grass. It looks neat and cared for and allows people to visit graves easily. Ground-feeding birds such as thrushes and wagtails enjoy this height. It may contain flowers close to the ground such as wild thyme or southheel and is suitable for rare grassland fungi which are able to push through the short grass. Medium-length grass is grass that's cut to a height of 10 centimetres or 4 inches. It can be cut with an ordinary mower, just set the cutting bar higher than normal. It can be cut less often than short grass, so fewer resources are needed. It will contain more flowers in it if it is cut short, such as birdfoot, trefoil, clover and southhill, which are important sources of food for insects. The height makes it beneficial for other invertebrates, small mammals and reptiles such as slowworms. We always recommend keeping grass short or medium length where there are areas containing memorials that are still being visited or areas where there's summer fetes or gatherings. Keeping a strip of short or medium height along the edges of paths can help keep the management looking intentional and really sets off the beauty of the flowery areas. Having paths cut through any areas of long grass is always welcome by visitors. Long and flower-rich benefits more plant and animal species than either short or medium. If the site is old and unimproved, then the range of flowers may be spectacular. The key to encouraging wildflowers to grow is keeping the nutrient level of the soil low. If the soil nutrients are too high, then coarse grasses such as Yorkshire fog, false oak grass and cocksfoot will use this nutrients, grow tall and outcompete the finer grasses and wildflowers. So how do we keep the soil nutrients low? The main way is to pick up grass clippings after every cut, whether that be cutting a few centimetres off or a few feet. Keep wildflower areas away from compost areas, as compost will leach nutrients into the soil. Areas of long grass in the summer need to be cut and removed before it turns yellow or brown, otherwise the nutrients will go back into the soil. Also, you can introduce yellow wattle. The flowers found here are perennials, not annuals, so you won't find poppies and cornflowers, etc., because annuals such as these grow where the ground is disturbed, such as by ploughing or digging. Managing long grass obviously requires less mowing in the growing season than short or medium grass does, saving time and money. But when it's time to cut, there's a lot of work to do in a small amount of time, so good planning and organisation is necessary. We always advise that groups start with just small areas of long grass until they're confident in managing it. So let's concentrate on managing long grass. Firstly, we need to leave it to grow and flower for around 12 to 14 weeks without cutting it. We can choose this 12-week window. So if we stop cutting around mid-March, 12 weeks later is mid-June and due a cut. If we stop cutting around mid-April, then 12 weeks later is mid-July and it's due a cut around then. The reason why it's best not to leave it for much more than around 12 weeks is to do with fertility. Remember that the key to wildflowers is low fertility soil. As mentioned, the idea is to cut the grass and remove it before the nutrients from it goes back into the soil. So we need to cut it when it's still green. If it looks like the photo here on the right, then instead of removing the nutrients when we cut the grass, the nutrients would have already gone back into the soil. The other disadvantage of leaving it until it's well over is that it is harder to cut and looks quite scraggy, so you're far more likely to get complaints. An exception to cutting after 12 weeks is that it's good to leave some areas of grass long all year round. We often refer to this as tussocky, and this benefits butterflies, amphibians, reptiles and mammals, just to name a few. These spaces should be strategically chosen, as the wildflowers in these areas will ultimately decrease. If you have an area with spring flowers, such as daffodils, primroses and violets, that you also want to dedicate to having long grass full of summer flowers, then simply let it carry on growing after the spring flowers and cut around June. When you're deciding where to leave grass to grow long, there are a few things to consider. Firstly, meadow flowers won't thrive in shady areas, they need light. So have your meadowy areas away from trees or areas shaded by buildings. Next, as we have heard, low nutrients is key for wildflowers. So wildflower areas are best kept away from spoil heaps and away from the compost area. Next, it's best to choose areas that we already know are quite species diverse. Do we know anyone who's already completed a survey of the site? Has the Wildlife Trust been involved? Are there records at the local record centre? And also have a look at the new National Biodiversity Atlas webpage, which I'll pop a screenshot of up later. If groups haven't left areas to grow long before and feel unsure of what areas are diverse, then we encourage them to head out and look at the ground. If they can see lots of different leaf shapes, then that area has a wide variety of perennial meadow species. So these are the best areas to leave to grow long. So as we can see, many burial grounds act as a Noah's Ark for this flower-rich habitat. There is great potential for these sites to become seed donor sites for regenerating other areas locally. We're trialling this as part of the Hotspots project, where St Andrew's Churchyard in Norton, Paris, is supplying seeds to roundabouts in Prestine. Moving on from grassland, let's take a look at the other treasures found in our Welsh burial grounds. Another feature often seen within churchyard boundaries is the ancient yew tree. Britain contains one of the world's greatest collection of ancient yews, with well over half of our total population being found within churchyards. Around 800 yews with an age of above 600 years have been recorded in churchyards across England and Wales. In the Diocese of Swansea and Brecon area, ancient yews, i.e. those that are thought to be at least 800 years old, are found in 23 churchyards, and veteran yews, thought to be at least 500 years old, are found in 55 churchyards. If you go to the Ancient Yew Group website, you can find a list of all these yews with details and photographs of every one. There are many different theories, and the main one is all about winning friends and influencing people. When Augustine came to bring Christianity to Britain in 597 AD, he was given the task of bringing the pagan faith to an end in a sympathetic and sensitive way. In 601, Pope Gregory suggested that places of pagan worship could simply be converted into Christian churches. So they headed to where pagans were already gathering, near yew trees, and rather than replacing the yew with a church, they simply built a church next to it. The pagans had long revered the yew tree as symbolic of death and rebirth, and used their branches and foliage for ceremonial occasions. This symbology was incorporated into Christian traditions. It meant that existing yews were protected, and as Christianity ran parallel to paganism in the early stages, yews were planted in churchyards as Christianity spread. Another moment in history that helped protect churchyard yews was that when Henry IV ordered yews to be cut down for the public service and other trees as well, he explicitly exempted the estates of the religious orders. So yews in churchyards avoided this spate of felling. The common yew is the most widely one found in churchyards, with the Irish yew planted more recently. Common yews tend to grow in a normal tree shape until around 600 years old, and then they often hollow out and thicken around the base and trunk in an uneven and lumpy way. Boughs which bend or partially snap and then lean onto the ground will take root. Boughs can also send down aerial roots, which can root on the ground or fuse with the main trunk. This regeneration, followed by new young growth, makes the yew tree virtually immortal, and it also makes it difficult to estimate age accurately. Experts do this using a variety of ways, including investigating old maps, looking up tree records, measuring tree girth, and looking at the growth form. Several yew trees are believed to be over 2,000 years old, and there is no known limit to how old they could live. If you take a look at the old stonework, you'll see a mosaic of colourful lichens. Lichens have been valued for humans for centuries. In ancient Rome, they were used to make purple dye for togas, and in the Outer Hebrides, they're still used to dye wool today. As natural outcrops of rock and stone have decreased over the years, burial grounds have become of supreme importance for lichen conservation. Of the 1,800 or so British species, over a third have been found in burial grounds, and many sites have well over 100 species on the stonework, on trees and in the grassland. Almost half of these are rare and seldom, if ever, occur in other places. Burial grounds support many species of lichen for a variety of reasons. The different rocks and building materials can have distinctive lichen communities: limestone, sandstone, marble, mortar, etc. Also, the stonework varies from rough to smooth, shaded to exposed, damp to dry, horizontal to vertical. All of these different environmental conditions favour different species. The lichens on the shaded north side of the wall are different from those on the sunny south side. Many lichens grow very slowly, sometimes less than 0.5 millimetre per year, so an individual lichen may be almost as old as the stone it is growing on. Country churchyards and urban cemeteries are among the best places to find a variety of fungi, particularly grassland ones. This is because these fungi thrive on old, undisturbed grassland, which has not been ploughed, reseeded or treated with chemicals. Waxcaps, fairy clubs and coral fungi are amongst the colourful and interesting fungi that can flourish. Before the development of the microscope in the 18th century, fungi were a puzzle, appearing overnight and sometimes taken to be the work of dark powers. This visible part is now known to be the fruit filled with tiny spores, with the rest of the fungus below ground. Burial grounds often have a mixture of tree types, which is really valuable to birds that raise several broods in a breeding season. These birds have to start early, so may use a conifer as a nesting site for the first nest when deciduous trees are leafless, and then may switch to the deciduous trees later in the season. Many sites offer a wealth of nesting, feeding and roosting opportunities. Think of the external building walls with buttresses, gargoyles, ledges, porches, towers, spires, along with moss and ivy covered memorials. The list goes on. Birds such as blackbirds, song thrushes and wrens use a burial site all year round, nesting in trees and hedges. Other birds such as swifts are here for only about 3 months, and those sites with suitable nesting places are really important for this beautiful bird which is in decline. Swifts need our help. Over the past 15 years, numbers of this amazing birds have dropped by about 40%. Some site managers, as well as ensuring that building renovation work doesn't remove swift nesting places, are also increasing nesting opportunities by putting swift boxes behind the louvres in the church tower. Nest holes, nest boxes or swift bricks can be fitted into and onto buildings, including listed ones, without difficulty. And then swift recordings to encourage swifter nests are played. Churches and sensitively managed burial grounds provide important roosting sites for bats, and some have provided a safe haven from habitat loss for many generations. Bats need nursery roosts for their young, winter roosts to hibernate, and also temporary roosts to digest their food and to sleep in during the day. Old churches are attractive to bats because they have many nooks and crannies to roost in and multiple entry and exit points. Bat boxes in trees can provide extra roost sites. Burial grounds can also be havens for hedgehogs, amphibians such as frogs and newts, and reptiles such as slowworms. These all love dead wood piles and compost heaps, using them to hunt for snails, beetles, worms and other invertebrates. Bees and butterflies benefit from the flower-rich grassland. So this has been a whistle-stop tour, just touching the surface on why burial grounds are hotspots for biodiversity. Next, we'll briefly cover how we can help groups. We're currently running a project funded by Natural Resource Wales and ourselves called the Biodiversity Hotspots Across Wales project. The purpose of this is to work with groups managing these sites across areas of Wales to help preserve and enhance their flower-rich grassland and engage the wider community. We've got webinars, meetups, virtual visits, online forum and grassland surveys, to name a few things. So if you know of groups who like advice, please let them know about us. Although burial grounds are crucial lifelines for many species, there aren't many accessible records of the wildlife that they contain, because species records are often logged in a grid square rather than on the actual site. Records are important as they help establish the distribution and size of populations, and regular recording helps us detect changes over time. They help to identify the location of rare and locally important species and can be used to help protect species and habitats from harm. As part of our Beautiful Burial Ground project, we're encouraging people to make records of the wildlife they see in burial grounds. To submit records, people just simply let us know what their name is, what they saw, where they saw it, and when they saw it. Once the records have been verified, then they can be seen at this new map and atlas, burialgrounds.nbmatlas.org. This can also be used to search for the records submitted for sites. So far, over 4,750 volunteers have taken part, and over 50,000 biological records have been submitted. This week, during Love Your Burial Ground Week, over 450 groups are running sessions to record the biodiversity in their burial ground, which will go onto this database for everyone to access. If you would like to get involved in recording, then we have some resources that may help. We have a starter guide and a botanical companion that are really useful publications to help you identify wildlife. In the botanical companion, we have a list of the most commonly found plant species in burial grounds, so that's a really good starting place. Both are available in Welsh and English. We can post you some starter guides for free, and the botanical companion is free to download from our website. If you would like to discover more, sign up to our e-newsletter and keep updated on burial ground news. Tune in to our beautiful burial ground podcast, which should be live next week. Pop to our website for resources in both Welsh and English, including our action pack aimed at managers, our education pack for primary schools, and our resources to help with recording. Let us know what species you find in a burial ground near you. And if you want to find a flower-rich site near you, then pop to our Burial Grounds to Inspire webpage, where we are mapping sites that we'd recommend visiting in the summer months. If you have a well-managed site that you feel could be on this map, then do let us know. And so, as we amble to the end of this talk, for one of the final slides, here's an aerial view of Babel Graveyard in Swansea. This helps put into context the importance of where many sites are, nestled right in the hearts of communities, accessible for those without transport, those with mobility difficulties, and perfect for many working in cities who would like to find a peaceful space in their busy day. Even rural churchyards are much needed sanctuaries for wildlife, as they are often some of the few spaces in an area that are not intensively managed. Burial grounds are often the only locally accessible green space for many people. The treasures within them that we've heard about today, from the flowery grassland to the soaring swifts, are there because of the way our ancestors have looked after these sites for centuries. Now it's our time to give them the attention and care they deserve and enjoy being custodians of these amazing spaces. Thank you for listening.